Namaste. Good afternoon. Good morning still. 11:11. Fortuitous. Uh, I, I've spoken about all phases of my own journey before. And, the journey to nowhere or the now here. And I thought that it would be a good time to just kind of, in a summation, put it all out there and let you do with it what you will. And that's why it's called All There Is. Because that's it, folks. So I remember one of my earliest memories is being in a crib and pointing to the corner and wondering, there was a voice coming to me, and there was a presence up in the corner of the room. And in my crib, I had a relationship with that, different than the mom coming close or the dad. But this was me. Somehow it was me, but I fully realized it was awakened me. My higher self, I guess, now looking back. But at that time, I had no way of knowing. But I grew up with this relationship of someone there. And it continued throughout my life, basically, until I got to a point where even my Sifu suggested that it's time to cut that tie, that particular connection had taken me as far as it could, and that I was to look to my two Buddhas, Bodhidharma, or Dhammo, and Roger Bacon, a Franciscan monk, 13th century Franciscan monk, were my two personal Buddhas. And so there was to look to them more and cut that tie. It did me well, and I blessed it. But anyway, the next really spiritual experience, other than having this relationship, which I thought was, I still think is quite normal, but I've never heard anyone else really talk about it, especially at the stage of infancy. We're not supposed to be aware, and whether it's a remembered memory or a real memory, who cares? It doesn't matter. The point is that image, that experience is part of me, who and what I am today. And the next time I can remember is we went to, I lived in a kind of rural county, still borderline rural county. And they had the 4-H club. And I don't know what the 4-H's were exactly for, but it was agriculture, a horticulture group of young people that raised animals, and mostly animals that were produce. Beef, cows, and then the cow would eventually, with this blue ribbon and all, be slaughtered and eaten. And it was a way to train youngsters to appreciate the animal, but to appreciate that the animal also had a role, and that not to make it a pet, that at some point it would have to be butchered, okay, and eaten, which was what the people considered its purpose. It was agriculture. Was food on your plate. And the cow looked at me. I was holding my mom's hand. I was about 4 or 5, probably closer to 5. And the cow said to me very clearly, "Please don't eat me." And later I just told my mom, "Hey, the cow talked to me." I said, "Oh yeah, really? Okay, that's nice." She was busy, adults, what's the word? Humoring a child, okay? Yeah, she said, "But don't eat me." And she says, "Oh, okay." Well, then I asked her, "Do I have to eat meat?" She says, "Of course you have to eat meat. You have to grow big and strong." She had, as Trump said recently, she had have a drink of the Kool-Aid, and that the idea that we need protein to be strong. And I remember saying, "Okay," and I was always into passive resistance. No sense denying or confrontational resistance. It's just kind of a passive. So my dog would come and sit at my feet, and I'd feed the dog all my meat. And this happened until I was about 13. And my mom was on to me at some point because the dog got so fat, She even made a comment at some point. "Boy, she loves you, and she sure got fat." Anyway, at about 13, my mom, I was big and strong, was on the swimming team, very athletic, played baseball through Little League and Pony League and Colt League. and third base, played third base, the hot corner. And she said at some point, okay, you can be a vegetarian. I'm not concerned about you're quite strong, broad chest, broad shoulders, swimmer. And anyway, immediately, being the contrarian that I am, I started eating meat. And I ate meat from probably 13 to 33, where I became a vegetarian again. But gave me permission, and then somehow it didn't interest me as much. But I started kind of spontaneously meditating. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, but sitting still somewhere out in nature, or just not talking for a while, or just, it was meditation. And when I was about 12 or 13, I like three, so I'll say 13, I discovered my mom was a metaphysician, which meant that the Rosicrucians, the Annie Besants, the Madame Blavatskys put out a very spiritual, very much Eastern philosophy, but in a Western guise, in the West, to make it so that it was familiar to Westerners. So the Western versions of Hinduism and Buddhism. And she had a book, which I'll never forget, big, kind of fat book. It was called The Autobiography of a Yogi. And the title just, what's a yogi? And it really stuck with me. And it had a guy with a turban, and very interesting, kindly looking gentleman on the cover. And I read it cover to cover several times. And got enveloped in that Kriya Yoga, as it turns out, of Paramahamsa Yogananda, who went on to found the Self-Realization Fellowship. And later in my life, I was fortunate enough to go to his retreat, ashram, in Malibu, in the foothills of Malibu, surrounded the lake and just peaceful. And his presence was so much there. But he was the founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship, which I didn't join. As much as I was attracted, I called him my first guru. But he died in 1952 when I was 4 years old. But anyway, I didn't feel compelled or impelled or propelled to join his group, because I just didn't join groups. So I became a Hindu, a de facto Hindu. And I studied and I read the Bhagavad Gita. I can remember reading the Bhagavad Gita. But it wasn't until I reached university age that I minored in Eastern philosophy and studied the Vedas and then the Upanishads that followed them, and from a rigorous academic standpoint. And I was destined to be an academician. I was destined to teach at college level, even from the first day I went to university. And I was in college prep classes all through. At that time, they had college prep classes, and I was being prepared for college all through elementary school and high school, junior high school. And pretty much Hindu. I didn't wear any turban. I didn't have any costume. But just attracted. And when I learned it academically, it was even more compelling, impelling. But I remember at a certain point, I was trying to clean up my mind, clean up my clogged up, crowded mind. And I ran across Alan Watts and Suzuki, The Way of Zen, and started getting really interested in Zen, and got involved with a dojo in Kalihi, where I lived on Oahu, where I practiced, we wore a gi and practiced formal meditation, and also practiced a martial art, which became, my martial art of all things became walking, Zen walk, which is the foundation of all martial arts, as it turns out, with the goal of becoming invisible. In other words, you're so much in the rhythm of things that you can go through a crowd without, you can part a crowd, you can go through a crowd without interfering, without slowing down, without making anybody else slow down. And this is hence the invisibility concept. And I stuck with it for 33 years, and it's rigorous training. One of my roshis told me, well, a roshi in training actually, he told me, if you're not sweating, it's not meditation, it's a war, it's a battle. And the whole idea of the samurai, Rinzai Zen was a samurai after all, and the martial aspects of meditation, the rigor of sitting straight. They used to physically hit you with a stick if you didn't sit in the correct posture. Well, I'm a slumper, I have a natural bent or inherited or I don't know, developed laziness. I don't have a straight spine, and it was really always a struggle. And what really kind of culminated the 33 years of rigorous, disciplined study and sitting. We also practice ikebana, the flower arrangement, and we practice chadao, the tea ceremony, and all these things were part of a fully developed samurai, the samurai code and all that. But I was always in the search of clarity. And being named Hayes, my family name is Hayes, like foggy, hazy. So I was always a little bit cloudy. And I thought clarity is what I wanted. And I misinterpreted, my understanding of my Zen studies was that you had to learn to first sit and quiet the mind, and then eventually silence the mind to the point where you stop the mind. So the mind you're free from your mind. Well, I was never free. The monkey mind was always there. And then the intellectual and the spiritual mind, the bigger minds, were also always there. And it dawned on me, I always used to kind of struggle against this. Clarity is what I want, and I'm going to get it by closing down one of the few tools in my arsenal, one of the few gifts. Think about it. You got 2 arms and 2 legs and a body and the senses and a mind. But to do battle against the great universe with just such a meager set of tools. And then you're going to eliminate your mind? And I relied on my mind more than anything else for survival. Think my way through it, right? Ponder and weigh things. So that never said right, plus the fact that I couldn't do it. So I gave up. After 33 years of practice, I just put away my gi, I put away all the affectations that were coming with the years of study, having spent time in Japan in a Renzai Zen temple with the goal of eventually becoming a monk after 3 years. And shortly before 3 years, when it came time to choose to be a monk, I chose not to be one, for better or worse, but I think for better. It just wasn't my fractal. It just wasn't for me. But I did enjoy my time there. And we did Zen walking and, honed my meditation skills and expanded them with the eventual idea that could pretty much meditate 24/7, doing the dishes, chop wood, carry water, after all. A Zen koan, chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. But anyway, something had to fill the void of this Rinzai. And at first, I just relaxed my shoulders and I relaxed my body. And meditation became a lot more fun. I permitted myself to really enjoy, to really love the ritual, my ritual of meditation. And it was during about 3 years into the surrender and the giving up that my 3-day process of awakening from previous experience with non-abiding awakening and then with abiding awakening. And I'm using Adyashanti's words, so Namaste Adyashanti. I love you and I really appreciate everything that you've said and done in your career. You're one of the ones that resonates with me. You and Chitnat Han. Thich Nhat Hanh. Anyway, the Plum Village guy, the Vietnamese that just passed away last year, the Vietnamese monk. But as I mentioned, Paramahamsa Yogananda in his autobiography Yoga, he talked about Kriya Yoga, much like Sadhguru, who I like and admire too, talks about Kriya Yoga, the energy, the mastering of energy and the use of energy. Well, I won't dwell much on my experience except in 2 aspects. Well, maybe there was 4 major things, but maybe I'll talk about 3. One is I re-experienced every lifetime I've ever had, of least importance probably. Number 2 is that I was in the Library of Alexandria, and the bookshelves, the tall bookshelves, as high as I could look on the horizon and vertically and horizontally, they were just coming to me at a very rapid, and the books were just pouring on top of me, and I was absorbing information as fast and as completely. And at one point I realized that I now knew, at that moment in time, I knew everything that has been, everything that is, and everything that will be. Okay? And just to stop here, I claim no originality in my thoughts. I was just reading about infinity, and anything that can happen will happen in an infinite amount of times. Anything that can be said, thought, felt, heard, seen, can happen an infinite amount of times. So it's kind of hard to beat that, isn't it? How do you fight infinity? You don't. You just go with the flow. Sometimes you have to slow the flow, as I tell my friend Wellington, and too much, too soon, too heavy. Slow the flow. Okay, so after my initial awakening, I entered you see the 3 Buddhas on the wall. I don't know if you can see them, green, red, and gold. And I entered the initial stage of awakening, which I call the green Buddha. In that picture represents for me, although the green Buddha, anyway, that's what that represents to me, is that jumping off the cliff, landing as a naked infant on a dirty sidewalk, having to fend for myself. Remember now, as a human being, we had so much, parents put so much effort and time. Of all the mammals, we have far most effort it takes to raise us to a point where we could survive on our own. But as a baby Buddha, I mean, you have to grow into your spirituality like everything else. So I experienced this. And let's go with 8 years today. I went with 6, it's either 6 or 8, and I have to research because I knew at the time. And I'm like everything else, I know it when I need to know it. Apparently, I don't need to know it right now. But let's go 8 years or 6 years, I think. Yeah, 6 years. And every 6 years, every 6 Buddha years was 1 human year. So after the first year, I was 6 and blah, 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 until I got around the middle-aged Buddha and the red Buddha, the second Buddha. So the first Buddha, the green one, reminds me of 2 things. First, initial awakening, the death of the ego, going through the cosmic choke, understanding about duality, which is another part I forgot to mention, to reconcile diametrically opposed opposites that to entertain the idea that they can be part of and one of the same. And what I used was destiny. And I say, yes, destiny. Everything's preordained. Yes, for sure. And then free will. I say, oh, sure, it's all free will. That's all we have. And here I said, well, wait a minute. I'm entertaining destiny and preordination and free will at the same time. How come I'm not exploding? And then I started laughing. That was, for me, that was the cosmic joke, is to see that these two opposite things that I'd been trained myself to see polarities, to see us and them, to see separation instead of unification, instead of the unity, the oneness. Everything about the ego trains you to ignore the obvious. And so I was familiar with this non-duality. I had my great belly laugh that seemed like it lasted for 6 or 8 hours. It lasted until I hurt. And then I found myself morphing into tears. And I mean, I wept. So from a great big belly laugh to copious tears. All in the same, sitting there, okay? In that mostly two and a half day experience of jumping off the precipice, of surrendering. And so I'm up to the middle Buddha. And at the middle Buddha, you're middle-aged. You feel secure in your Buddhahood. You don't have any questions. That was the period that when my questions ran out. As a green Buddha, before green, I was full of questions. And by the time I got to be a middle-aged Buddha, I realized the futility that questions were just speculation. And it was entertaining. And maybe I thought that someone had the answers, but I had discovered, unsurprisingly, that the answers lay within. That's where the answers were. You don't need to ask yourself that question anymore, especially when you've celebrated the passing of at least the physical, mental, emotional ego. You still have to battle the spiritual ego, and I did that somewhere between green and red Buddha, where I started thinking I was special and unique, and geez, I'm awakened, and I'm a master, and Shifu, and all Roshi and everything rolled into one. And then I had to see that this is the biggest obstacle. This is bigger than the physical ego of the mind and the senses. So somewhere in between reaching, I think this was part of the maturation process. Okay. And then recently the Golden Buddha, 6-8 months ago, Buddha, the historical Buddha, the Buddha, although there's many Buddhas, but I'm talking about Sakyamuni, physically came into my body, and my aura immediately became golden. It increased, it swelled up, but it became golden. I went from a deep blue that I've always carried to a golden, blindingly golden aura. And this is when Buddha historical Buddha physically came into my body. And I already mentioned my spirit guides, the two Buddhas, Bodhidharma or Dhammo, and Roger Bacon, the Franciscan monk. How that they took the place of whatever that was in the corner that I call my higher self. Obviously wasn't. My master told me years later that some entity had attached itself to me and had been with me. And I guess that's what I was communicating. That wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't it wasn't a curse, it was a blessing. But it no longer served my need, and it kept that being from doing its job. It needed to go on with its own journey. So, around this time, I was getting to be, I had some physical challenges. I had a heart attack, uh, and with culminating in open heart surgery and aortic valve replacement. So I had some physical. 59 was my first heart attack. Had a smaller one at 64, and then that year had a open heart surgery, aortic valve replacement. But I had just started seeing my Sifu, my only teacher that I've ever had in the flesh. And the interesting thing is he's Chinese and doesn't speak a word of English. And I've lived in Taiwan very long, but very limited, especially not on the level, the spiritual level he was talking about. I had no grasp of the Chinese, but I think the language was an impediment at that part, and that the in-shin, the heart-to-heart that we had. And I remember sitting with him the first time, and we both laughed. We both laughed and laughed like two children. And afterwards, people had told me that she was so serious. I've never seen him laugh like that. And I thought, oh. And I remember he told me that what he loved about me was that at 66, probably 65, I was innocent and pure. And it puzzled him that how I grew to this age with this many experiences and all life has to throw at me and still arrive at his foot, sitting at his feet with this purity and innocence that he so loved. So I stayed with him and then we got to a point where he said, okay, I'm going to begin advanced teachings, he called them. And oh, good, I get to go in because it's very special. He had 100,000 or 150,000 followers at that time. So to be able to have the opportunity to sit at his feet, even though I needed a translator and he would have his minder there, and there would always be 3 or 4 other people in the room besides me, even though it felt like the relationship was just the two of us. But language and necessity. He has a tea girl bring him tea, who I loved, and she was just graceful and beautiful. And but preceding the story, the process of getting to see Sifu, of joining the group, because I was the first foreigner, really the first foreigner to join, and they hadn't any preparation for me. They didn't know how to. There was a procedure. You had to go through some practice meditations and some trainings, and before you could go and sit and actually be in his presence. Okay, everybody wore purple matching T-shirts, and before you could buy a purple T-shirt to sit with the other purple people, a couple thousand people, you needed to pass some steps, be qualified. And so I remember I told my Taiwanese mom and dad that I wanted to see Sifu in the flesh. Just put me in the farthest corner, because it was in a cavernous auditorium and it had a balcony. Put me up there in that corner, and I'll be able to tell immediately if he's a teacher, because I've never had a teacher and I've never wanted one, but I could entertain the possibility that he may be. It's within the realm of possibility. So they scheduled a meeting with me, who then was his number 2. And she sat, and she could understand. I can see in the eyes, she could understand English, but she felt hesitant. I was a college instructor, and she teaching English, and she felt reluctant to speak her poor English in front of me, if it was indeed poor. So the question was asked to me, define Zen. And it spontaneous, the answer just came to me. It wasn't rehearsed, and I never really remember putting those words together, but I just said the quickest way home. She jumped up like a shot, ran out of the room, and it turns out Sifu was in the room right next door, and told him what I said. And this is one of his fundamental teachings, which I hadn't been exposed, I had no way of being exposed to. And even if I was exposed to, it was in a Chinese. I might as well have been in Pig Latin. Well, maybe I understand Pig Latin better than Chinese. Probably I do. But he came in. And that's when we sat and laughed, and we met for the first time, and afterwards he did a hands-on and did a blessing for me. And next thing I know, I'm sitting front row center with a purple shirt in the meditation class, because this was just before he was going to have a meditation. So there I was, front row center, purple t-shirt. He had put English speakers next to me, and I learned from the very beginning they were trying to translate for me. And I said, you know what, don't translate. You get this is your time too. You get the message from Sifu. You take, don't bother yourself with translation. And I never, if I didn't learn the language, I never put on someone else to translate for me. Well, most times. Government stuff, I needed help sometimes. But I just didn't feel like the obligation was always on me. And there's a lot of reasons why I chose, as an actual choice, not to speak Chinese. But anyway, be that as it may. And I stayed with him for almost 5 years, I guess. And we talked about this advanced teaching, and I kept waiting and waiting. We're going to go in his office, and it took me a while to realize, hey, it's wordless. The teachings are not verbal. It's inshin, as Chinese say, heart to heart. And he was talking to me, but I wasn't aware of it. He was teaching me, and I finally became aware of it. And I actually remember I was looking at my screen in my office at the university, and I could actually, he took over the screen for a moment, and then it was gone. And then I said, oh, and then I started paying attention. And, I can't put in words what the teachings were, because they're the teachings beyond words. Anyway, I distinctly remember that he took me to the cliff, he took me to the abyss, and told me to jump, and he turned around and walked away, ignoring whatever I did. He didn't watch whether I jumped or hesitated or anything. He turned around and walked away, and this was symbolic of me, that he had taken me as far as he could, and now it's on me, as it should be. And later on, as I become the Golden Buddha, I recognized that there's some things that he had to do, some transmissions, and I liken it to an old-fashioned radio dial and find the right frequency. And he had to create the right frequency for the conditions of me making this ultimate surrender and sacrifice and fearlessly jumping. Because fear had died. Fear of death, fear of everything had died in my awakening. So I made the leap, and I told you, dirty sidewalk, infant, with nobody around. I had to fend for myself until I was, mature enough. But somehow it was provided for. I don't know by who or by what. Myself, I guess. But somewhere in this process of backtracking a little bit, of giving up on the clarity, and the clarity I meant clarity of seeing. That's what clarity meant to me. To look down through clear water and see pebbles at the bottom of the well, 20, 30 feet deep, and see clearly through the water. This clarity was seeing for me. Okay? Sorry, I get a little uncomfortable. But all of a sudden I noticed that while I'm seeking clarity, let me stand up. While I'm seeking clarity, and this clarity of seeing, I realized that I'd been gifted, that my Zen studies had gifted me with equanimity, the ability to remain in a constant state of balance, of evenness, not to react to good, bad, indifferent, to react to everything as equal, equanimity. What a blessing. I said, well, this is better than clarity. And I had to quit. I had to surrender. I had to give up before I recognized this gift that I'd been given. of equanimity. And then, shortly after, spontaneously, as everything tends to happen, spontaneously came a realization that what I meant by clarity was never clarity of vision, seeing clearly. It was clarity of purpose. Why am I here? Why is the world here? What are we doing? And this had always been with me. I was always clear. My purpose was clear. I wanted to awaken from my deep slumber. I wanted to be reunited from what I had artificially, through my egos, separated myself for, the oneness, the infinite love, the cosmic song, the cosmic joy of oneness, of allness, of isness. That's what clarity meant. The clarity that I was talking about. Now, I attribute my misunderstanding of Zazen, my Zazen practice, to the idea that you have to quiet, that you have to tame the mind, quiet, silence, quiet. There's 3 steps. Minimize, and then stop it altogether. That these were the Zen precepts, and this was the goals of Zen. I made that up. I still to this day don't know. Probably there's not a grain of truth, of reality in that. It's my misunderstanding. But I had no one to talk to, or I sought no one's counsel. This was just me. The Lone Ranger I'd always been, just me. Until I had my time, my sacred special time with Sifu, with my Sifu, with our Sifu. Okay, and somewhere now here I am. And before, somewhere around the time of the maturity, the Red Buddha, I started becoming interested. I got exposed to a beautiful Swami and his lectures on YouTube about Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. And I had told you, my waking up experience, I was familiar with non-dualism. But I started studying it now through Advaita Vedanta. And just before Advaita Vedanta, I'd been leading, Chan. My teacher was Chan, which is the Bodhidharma, the 6th patriarch that went to the 28th Indian patriarch who went to China to become the first patriarch that they call Damo, who started Chan. And then that went in through Korea and into Japan and became Zen. So up until even when my teacher was still kind of found my way back into Zen. But when I got exposed to the Hindu, first I learned about the 4 paths, the yogic paths. Kriya Yoga I mentioned earlier, that Parahamsa and Sadguru, the energy. And then there's karma through your actions, seva, doing things in the ashram, selfless work dedicated to the betterment of all, and seeking no recognition. This is the key. And then there was Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of love. And the Green Buddha, I'll tell you, let's go on to the goddess. This was the love and the chanting and the adoration of the Guru, the worship of the Guru, the mantras, the chanting, the singing, the dancing. This is all bhakti. And that wasn't me. I needed to work on that, but compassion. And the 4th one, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, the intellectual path, which they said from the very beginning was the hardest. I would choose the hardest, but it chose me because this was an intellectual. And what you do in Jnana Yoga is first you gather information, you read everything, you absorb everything. And in that information, because there's tons of it, you start gleaming the knowledge. You gain knowledge through the information, you discard. So it's a matter of finding, searching, and then sorting, the finding, so knowledge, gleaming the knowledge, and there was nuggets of gold, solid gold, tucked into the knowledge. So this is a wisdom that turned out to be the end game, or so I thought. And one of the things that I've read is those that are attracted to jnana yoga got to practice compassion, the heart chakra, the green color, like the green Buddha, to combine bhakti and jhana. This, to be too much in your head, you can't forget about your heart. That's why I had some green shirts made. Okay, the red Buddha was the Buddha, the root chakra, the foundation, and this is when the red is when I became comfortable enough with my experience and what I had to share that I would offer it. And this is when my YouTube career began, and I verbalized and shared my experiences. And here I am back to Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualism. And it's interesting that there's, so I remember intellectually, it's just intellectually this process, jnana yoga, was so rigorous. 2 years of just solid reading, sorting, intensity of not only you have to locate, sort, then you have to create some kind of file system, and then you have to create some way to access your files. Information is useless unless you can access it, right? So this is all process, rigorous process. At the same time, trying to develop my compassion, realizing that I was out of balance and that I needed to be more concerned about my heart and my uncompromising love for one and all. But the red Buddha, the root chakra, is the foundation. And it's funny that this is the fourth chakra, the center chakra is the heart. But I jumped down to the root because root is the foundation. And I was solid in my foundation, was solid in my roots. I was confident in that I could live it, that I could breathe it, that I could share it. 24/7, live it. So then I got to take a break after this 2 years. It was just like the rigorous physical training of Zen, and then I had the rigorous intellectual training of jnana yoga, of being a jnana yogi, and then again to surrender, to breathe, to relax, to practice, to remember to smile. I have to remember to smile, to practice and remember to smile and just relax and enjoy life as it is. And understanding that joy is simply the recognition and acceptance of life as it is. So to dwell in a constant state of equanimity was joy. So then with one lecture, I don't know, my Swami did a really recent video, YouTube video, that really hit home, and he took me back to the Bhagavad Gita, which I usually have a copy. The I Ching and the Bhagavad Gita, I don't see it, I somehow put them away, but they're usually right there. I Ching, Bhagavad Gita, the two single most important books to me. So he's talking about Krishna's talking to Arjuna on the battlefield. Those of you know the setting for the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna makes a statement, I pervade this entire universe as consciousness. Okay. Western, the farthest they could get is that consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness they can't answer, but they basically say consciousness is created by the mind. Well, Krishna begs to differ. He says, I pervade this entire universe as consciousness. And then he said, well, not really. The next verse, not really. You pervade the universe as pure consciousness. And he says, okay, you pervade the universe. It's you. It's all you. Me, big me. It's a pure consciousness. And then he clarifies and said, I'm in all beings. And in the next breath he goes, but not really. Actually, all beings are within me. I am not in them. Get this, now this sent me for a loop. All beings are within me, including moi, including me, the little me. All beings are within me. I am not in them. So as Western scientists kind of postulate, he went on to say, it's not that there is a physical universe out there and then consciousness comes along and enters. No, consciousness is the only reality in which the universe appears. Now this brings me back to Maya. And Maya is an object, it's a object, name, form, and transaction. It can be objectified. Anything that's an object is subjectivity and objectivity. Everything that's an object, including your mind that's a thing, is part of this Maya. And we talk about cause and effect, you know. That was part of my awakening, cause and effect. For every reaction, there's an equal. For every action, there's an equal reaction. It's a little more elegant than that, but he said that no, the effect exists in the cause. Krishna said, all beings are in me and I am not in them. The world is an appearance in me. And then the next page goes, well, that's not exactly true either. Now I'm prepared. So these steps are preparing, they're not contradictory, they're preparing you for greater and greater mind-boggling truths. He says, the universe is an appearance in Brahman. So he goes from Krishna himself, he takes, no, it's to God. Krishna was only one aspect of God. You know, they had Vishnu, and they had, who was the elephant? They had a nice elephant, and they had Shiva, and it's one of the things that kind of turned me off to when I started appreciating the simplicity, the so-called simplicity, which is, simplicity turns out to be a lot more difficult than complexity, believe me. But, you know, complexity and so many gods and goddesses. And somewhere in all of this, and actually before this, because this is very recent, and let's go and finish that. So the universe is an appearance in Brahman, and then he takes it further. He said, remember, he says, within me, and he's a part of God. Everything is not within me. God only is all. God only is all. No, God only. This is hard to read. God only. All else is not. God only is all, is not. All is not. God only. All is not. It's really the tough one, and it leaves you there. So this is the flowering of Advaita Vedanta. It took you through kind of contradictions. And maybe in the Bhagavad Gita, it's one verse to the next verse to the next verse. Man, that's a long distance to traverse in a rapid amount of time. But I want to end with something that touched me because somewhere in between, I don't know when I got interested in Tibetan Buddhism. I had a long-standing interest in Tibetan Buddhism. And, after, I guess, the simplicity of Zen and then kind of the complexity of, you see the painting or the sand painting of Tibetan Buddhism and all the demons and just amazing. And I liked the minutiae of it again. My mind was able to accept the minute and the diverse. And I just want to leave it here because it's Zazen season was so rigorous. And I read somewhere recently that Tibetan Buddhism, it says, look at the Dalai Lama. He sits like a sack of potatoes. He's not worried about his posture. A sack of potatoes. So I want to end this with two things. This all goes to simplicity and ordinariness. Everything I am today is so ordinary. It's the natural, it's all of our natural condition. There's nothing special. There's nothing any more special than anybody else. We're all in this together. But I just want to leave you as a sack of potatoes. Thank you.